young man in his own world, J.Lo, living a life so lavish it's hard to believe it's real. He had more spending power than almost anyone else on earth, not from a thriving business empire or inheritance, but through one of the biggest financial frauds in history. By stealing around $4.5 billion, J.Lo orchestrated a scam so massive it would make even the most notorious con artists blush. This is the jaw-dropping true story of how he became one of the most wanted men in the world. J.Lo's rise to infamy began on a small Malaysian island. Born into a middle-class family, he was ambitious and clever, but no one could have guessed he'd mastermind a scheme that would shock the globe. The money he stole wasn't tied up in assets or complicated investments. It was liquid cash, and he spent it as fast as he stole it. Picture him strolling into the world's most exclusive casinos and nightclubs, dropping hundreds of thousands of dollars on drinks in a single night. Private jets? He had several. Mansions? Of course. Picasso paintings? Just a small part of his collection. J.Lo's life was a spectacle of extravagance, a real-life version of The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie he ironically financed using his stolen millions. Yes, you heard that right. J.Lo's fraud funded the Hollywood blockbuster about financial scams. He mingled with Hollywood stars, dated supermodels, and built a reputation as the ultimate party king. But behind the glitz and glamour was a dark truth. Few knew the money fueling his wild lifestyle was stolen from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, a crime that left a nation reeling and J.Lo on the run. So, how does a small-town boy pull off one of the largest financial frauds ever, charm Hollywood's elite, and still evade capture? Stick with us as we unravel this insane true story of deceit, power, and unimaginable wealth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're diving deep into more shocking stories like this, and you won't want to miss a single one. A young man with big dreams, J.Lo, born on the Malaysian island of Penang. In 1998, his parents made a life-changing decision to send him to Harrow, one of the most prestigious boarding schools in England. That move would set the stage for J.Lo's incredible and controversial future. Reflecting on his time at Harrow, J.Lo later said, "That time was very important for me. That's when I built the core foundation of contacts for the future." J.Lo came from a wealthy family, but at Harrow, he quickly realized his wealth paled compared to that of his classmates. Many of them were heirs to royal fortunes or massive oil empires. While J.Lo's family were millionaires, his peers were the children of billionaires. But instead of feeling out of place, J.Lo saw this as a golden opportunity. Determined to blend in and impress, he invited some of these ultra-rich students to spend a summer in Malaysia. To elevate his status, J.Lo borrowed a 160-foot yacht from a wealthy family friend. To sell the illusion, he replaced all the family photos on board with pictures of himself, making his friends believe the yacht belonged to him. J.Lo had a talent for creating the illusion of power and wealth. He was always thinking a step ahead. One time, he forged a letter using Brunei embassy letterhead to reserve a VIP table at a high-end nightclub in London. Posing as a member of the Brunei royal family, J.Lo and his underage friends partied alongside football stars and supermodels. It was a valuable lesson for J.Lo. The appearance of wealth and influence could open doors that were closed to others. After Harrow, J.Lo moved on to Wharton University in the United States. Here, his mission to craft a powerful persona only intensified. J.Lo began writing articles on stocks for the university's newspaper, the Wharton Journal. But instead of doing his own analysis, he plagiarized reports from Wall Street analysts. Surprisingly, no one caught on, and J.Lo quickly gained a reputation as a sharp stock picker. He also drove around campus in a Lexus convertible that he claimed to own, though it was actually leased. Rumors spread that J.Lo was a Malaysian prince, and he didn't bother correcting them. In fact, he leaned into the myth to further bolster his image. J.Lo understood one thing very well. It's not just what you know, but who you know. He had a knack for spotting the wealthiest and most influential students at Wharton and made it his mission to befriend them. Just like he had done at Harrow, J.Lo worked tirelessly to build connections with people who could elevate his status. One of his most memorable moves was throwing a massive birthday party while at Wharton. J.Lo rented out an exclusive nightclub, set up an open bar, and sent out invitations with his name prominently displayed. The party was a hit, but what the attendees didn't know was that J.Lo had only paid a deposit for the event and didn't actually have the money to cover the full cost. After the party, he stalled the club owners for months and eventually negotiated a steep discount. None of this mattered to the guests, though. They left believing J.Lo was every bit as rich as he claimed to be. J.Lo's strategy was working. He was building a reputation as a wealthy and influential figure, gaining access to elite circles. For J.Lo, the lies were worth it if they got him closer to his goals. J.Lo's network expanded even further when he convinced some of his Arab friends to organize a tour across the Middle East. This tour introduced him to some of the wealthiest families in the region, including minor royals. J.Lo was particularly interested in understanding the power dynamics and financial structures of the Middle East. One royal acquaintance even commented on how J.Lo seemed to be mapping out who controlled the money in each country. One of the most important connections J.Lo made during this time was with officials managing Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth funds. These funds, which are essentially massive pools of government-controlled money, are often used by oil-rich nations to diversify their economies. However, they are notoriously opaque, with little oversight or accountability. J.Lo saw this lack of transparency as an opportunity he could exploit. After completing his networking tour in the Middle East, J.Lo returned to Wharton to finish his studies. Shortly after graduating, he launched his own company, the Winton Group. He picked the name as a play on words, saying he was going to win tons of money. The company's mission was to broker deals between Middle Eastern investors and Malaysian projects. To create the appearance of success, J.Lo rented luxurious offices in the iconic Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur. He could barely afford the rent but managed to secure a loan from a local bank, knowing that having an impressive office would lend credibility to his business. With his company established, J.Lo began leveraging the connections he had spent years cultivating. His network of Middle Eastern contacts introduced him to even wealthier individuals and organizations. J.Lo was now perfectly positioned to execute what would become one of the most audacious financial scams in history. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into J.Lo's schemes, his rise to power, and the shocking lengths he went to achieve his goals. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're bringing you more incredible stories like this one, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. J.Lo's journey to ultimate power wasn't a series of lucky breaks. It was a masterclass in manipulation and foresight. One of J.Lo's closest friends from Harrow was Riza Aziz, the stepson of Najib Razak, a prominent Malaysian politician who, at the time, was the Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia. J.Lo saw an opportunity here. While being friends with Riza gave him access to Najib's inner circle, J.Lo knew he needed to prove his worth to solidify his position. Around this time, Malaysia was looking for partners to help fund a massive construction project. The plan was to create a financial and lifestyle hub similar to Singapore, but investors were needed to make it happen. J.Lo seized the opportunity. Leveraging the wealthy connections he'd cultivated in the Middle East, he brokered a deal to bring in the required investments. The genius part? J.Lo let Najib take all the credit. Though Najib had done none of the work, the deal boosted his popularity, painting him as a leader capable of attracting significant foreign investments. This newfound fame helped Najib secure the position of Prime Minister in 2009. For J.Lo, this wasn't just a business win. By ensuring Najib's rise to power, J.Lo earned his unwavering trust. At just 27 years old, J.Lo now had the ear of the most powerful man in Malaysia. But he didn't stop there. J.Lo embedded himself further into Najib's family. He bought expensive jewelry for Najib's wife, paid for Najib's daughter's college tuition, and even attended her graduation. By the time Najib was sworn in as Prime Minister, he trusted J.Lo completely. Not one to waste time, J.Lo approached Najib with an ambitious idea. He suggested Malaysia create its own sovereign wealth fund, similar to those in the Middle East, to invest globally and grow the nation's economy. Officially, the fund, called One Malaysia Development Berhad, 1MDB, would focus on green energy, tourism, and creating jobs for Malaysians. But J.Lo had a hidden agenda. He proposed using some of the fund's money to support Najib's political goals, such as hosting grand events or building affordable housing in areas where Najib needed more votes. For Najib, this seemed like a win-win. He agreed to let J.Lo run 1MDB, giving him almost complete control. Although Najib was officially the chairman of the fund, J.Lo operated as its real leader. He filled key positions with loyal allies who wouldn't question his decisions. With no one to oversee him, J.Lo essentially had $1 billion fund at his disposal. It didn't take long for J.Lo to set his plan in motion. Through his connections in Saudi Arabia, J.Lo arranged a joint venture with PetroSaudi, an oil company. The agreement was for 1MDB to invest $1 billion into the project, which was nearly all the money in the fund at the time. Najib, fully trusting J.Lo, gave him permission to transfer the money. But J.Lo had other plans. Instead of transferring the full $1 billion to the joint venture account, J.Lo sent only $300 million. The remaining $700 million was funneled to a company called Goodstar Limited, which had a bank account in Switzerland. J.Lo told everyone that Goodstar Limited was owned by PetroSaudi and that the payment was necessary to settle a pre-existing debt. This, however, was a lie. Goodstar Limited was nothing more than a shell company. Its ownership was concealed through something called bearer shares. Unlike regular shares, which are registered to a specific owner, bearer shares belong to whoever physically holds the certificate. This made it nearly impossible to trace ownership. In this case, there was only one share for Goodstar Limited, and it was held by J.Lo himself. In one swift move, J.Lo had siphoned $700 million from 1MDB into his own account. On paper, it appeared as though the money was part of the PetroSaudi joint venture. In reality, J.Lo had just pulled off one of the most audacious financial heists ever. What made J.Lo's scam so brilliant was its simplicity. But the real genius lay in the groundwork he'd laid over the years. J.Lo had spent his life building a network of powerful connections, carefully positioning himself as someone who could get things done. By the time he gained control of 1MDB, he was surrounded by loyal allies and had the full trust of the Malaysian Prime Minister. With $700 million now in his pocket, J.Lo's next step was clear: take his lifestyle to the next level. J.Lo's newfound wealth allowed him to bribe key officials to ensure their silence. He also continued to surround himself with yes-men who wouldn't question his decisions. With no one to challenge him, J.Lo had free reign over 1MDB's funds. But the stolen money wasn't just sitting in a bank account. J.Lo used it to finance a life of unimaginable luxury. He bought multi-million-dollar properties, threw extravagant parties, and even funded Hollywood movies. The most ironic of all, he financed the film The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie about financial fraud, using money he had stolen from 1MDB. As J.Lo's empire grew, so did his audacity. He began moving even larger sums of money through complex financial structures to cover his tracks. But no matter how careful he was, cracks started to appear. Whistleblowers, journalists, and authorities began asking questions about where 1MDB's money was going. Still, J.Lo's carefully built network of loyalists and his charm bought him time. J.Lo's story is one of pretense, manipulation, and sheer audacity. From forging connections at Harrow to controlling a billion-dollar fund, every move was calculated. His ability to blend charm with deception allowed him to pull off one of the biggest financial frauds in history. And while his tale is far from over, one thing is clear: J.Lo's rise to power is a masterclass in how far someone can go when they're willing to do whatever it takes. J.Lo had taken hundreds of millions of dollars from Malaysia's sovereign fund and moved it to secret Swiss bank accounts. He used his powerful friends to keep everything quiet so no one would notice what he was doing. Unlike most rich people, whose money is tied up in companies or stocks, J.Lo's money was all cash. He could spend it however he liked, and he wasted no time doing just that. With all that stolen money, J.Lo began living like a king. He bought yachts, mansions, and sports cars. He even bought a fancy hotel in Beverly Hills. Most nights, he could be found at exclusive nightclubs and casinos. Between October 2009 and June 2010, J.Lo and his friends spent $85 million on private jets, expensive alcohol, gambling, and paying models and Hollywood celebrities to party with them. J.Lo realized he could use his money to build a name for himself. He let it be known in Hollywood that he was willing to pay celebrities over $100,000 just to show up at his events. Even the rich and famous were shocked by how much J.Lo spent. He could lose $1 million in a poker game and not even blink. Naturally, this brought all kinds of famous people to his side. J.Lo, who used to admire Paris Hilton from afar during his college days, now partied with her regularly. He threw secret, over-the-top parties filled with A-list celebrities and Playboy models. There's even a story about J.Lo in a Las Vegas suite with Leonardo DiCaprio and 20 Playboy bunnies. He became known for handing out insanely expensive gifts. For example, he gave Kim Kardashian a white Ferrari as a wedding gift and would casually hand out designer handbags worth tens of thousands of dollars to people he had just met. One of his most unforgettable parties was his birthday bash in Las Vegas. It wasn't just a party, it was a full-blown event. Guests included Kanye West, Bradley Cooper, Robert De Niro, Michael Phelps, Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, and Psy, who performed his hit song Gangnam Style. Britney Spears even jumped out of a giant cake to sing "Happy Birthday" to J.Lo. That single night reportedly cost tens of millions of dollars. While many celebrities were paid to attend his events, even they admitted that J.Lo knew how to throw an incredible party. To J.Lo, these parties weren't just for fun. They were a way to boost his image and attract even more powerful people into his circle. Newspapers began calling him the big spending Malaysian and the mystery man of the club scene. J.Lo's wild lifestyle didn't go unnoticed. At one point, he dated supermodel Miranda Kerr and spoiled her with expensive gifts. But it wasn't just about the money. J.Lo wanted to outdo everyone. On one New Year's Eve, he celebrated the countdown in Sydney, Australia. Then, he and his friends hopped on a private jet and flew to Las Vegas to celebrate New Year's again on the same night. In another instance, he got into a bidding war for a bottle of champagne and ended up spending €2 million on it. People started calling J.Lo the Asian Great Gatsby. It wasn't just because of his flashy parties, but also because of how he acted at them. J.Lo didn't seem to fully join in the fun. Instead, he wandered around, checking on guests and making sure everyone was having a good time. He seemed shy, more focused on keeping up appearances than enjoying himself. To some, it felt fake, like the parties were just for show, not for real enjoyment. Even though his profile was rising, J.Lo stayed mysterious. A quick Google search wouldn't reveal much about him. Rumors swirled. Some thought he was an arms dealer. Others believed he was royalty. To his close friends, he was simply Panda, a nickname they gave him because of his round and cuddly appearance. But behind his charm and lavish spending, there was a darker truth. Most of the stolen money went to fund his extravagant lifestyle, but some of it was used as a political slush fund for Najib Razak, the Malaysian Prime Minister. Still, J.Lo wasn't satisfied. He wanted to start a legitimate business and make a name for himself in Hollywood. J.Lo loved the glitz and glamour of Los Angeles. Using his stolen money, he helped start a production company called Red Granite Pictures. As usual, J.Lo kept his involvement secret, acting as the shadow financier. Around this time, he learned that Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese wanted to make The Wolf of Wall Street. The movie needed a $100 million budget, but no big Hollywood studio wanted to take the risk. J.Lo's company stepped in and funded the project, giving DiCaprio and Scorsese full creative control. J.Lo's name appeared in the film's credits, and when DiCaprio won a Golden Globe for his role, he thanked J.Lo in his speech. The irony was hard to miss. A movie about financial fraud had been funded with stolen money. Interestingly, the real-life Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, wasn't fooled. He attended one of J.Lo's parties and immediately suspected something was off. "You wouldn't spend money you worked for like that," Belfort said. "This has got to be stolen." Despite a few doubts, most people around J.Lo didn't ask questions. He continued expanding his empire. His company even bought a stake in EMI Music Publishing, and he joined its advisory board. J.Lo's goal was clear: to transform himself from a party-throwing playboy into a legitimate media mogul. He hoped that one day, his ventures would make enough money to repay what he had taken from 1MDB. But there was a problem. J.Lo couldn't stop spending. He always wanted bigger parties, flashier purchases, and more power. It became obvious that J.Lo's fortune couldn't support his lifestyle forever. He needed more money, and fast. That meant going back to the very fund he had already robbed. Before we dive into the next part of J.Lo's story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We've got more amazing stories like this one, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Cheers! J.Lo was a man with a plan, and he knew exactly how to execute it. His latest target was Kim Leisner, the head of Goldman Sachs' Asia division. To win him over, J.Lo pulled out all the stops. He arranged for a private jet to pick Kim up and flew him to a meeting with one of the wealthiest sheiks in the world. The luxurious treatment was only the beginning. Once Kim was suitably impressed, J.Lo laid out his vision. He wanted Goldman Sachs to help 1MDB raise billions of dollars through bond sales. J.Lo understood that credibility was everything. By involving a big-name Wall Street bank like Goldman Sachs, the deal would look legitimate to investors. The plan seemed straightforward. Goldman Sachs would issue bonds, which investors would purchase, believing their money would fund power plants in Malaysia. But there was a catch. 1MDB had no credit rating, making it difficult to attract investors. To solve this, Goldman Sachs paired 1MDB with Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, which had $70 billion in assets and an excellent credit rating. With Goldman Sachs backing the deal and Abu Dhabi's credibility added to the mix, the bond package became irresistible. In 2012, 1MDB successfully issued $3.5 billion in bonds through Goldman Sachs. But while everything appeared above board, J.Lo had other plans. Behind the scenes, J.Lo diverted $1.4 billion from the bond proceeds into an offshore company registered in the British Virgin Islands, a notorious tax haven. He repeated this scheme in 2013 when 1MDB issued another $3 billion in bonds. Once again, J.Lo siphoned off large sums into offshore accounts under his control. The money never went to power plants, as promised. Instead, billions of dollars vanished into shell companies and personal accounts. J.Lo didn't just keep the money for himself. He used some of it to pay off key players who helped him pull off the scam, including Tim Leisner from Goldman Sachs. The rest funded his extravagant lifestyle. J.Lo bought famous artwork, massive mansions, and indulged in endless gambling and wild parties. The spending was insane, but the scheme worked. He even made sure to keep Malaysia's Prime Minister, Najib Razak, happy with generous kickbacks. This ensured Najib didn't ask too many questions and allowed J.Lo to keep control. Goldman Sachs also profited handsomely, earning $600 million in fees, an amount far above what was typical for a deal of this size. Many believed this suggested the bank knew something wasn't right but chose to ignore it for a massive payout. Without Goldman Sachs's reputation and involvement, 1MDB would never have been able to raise such large amounts of money. J.Lo's methods for stealing the funds were both bold and clever. One of his key strategies was setting up fake companies with names that sounded like real, well-known firms. For instance, he created a shell company called BlackRock Commodities Global Limited, which closely resembled the name of the global investment giant BlackRock. This made transactions appear legitimate, avoiding suspicion. Another tactic J.Lo used was called layering. He moved money between multiple offshore accounts, creating a web of transactions that made the funds appear like legitimate business deals or loans. This layering process added so much complexity that tracing the money back to its original source became nearly impossible. Many of these accounts were registered in tax havens with minimal oversight, giving J.Lo the perfect cover. J.Lo also took advantage of trust accounts at U.S. law firms. These accounts, protected by client confidentiality rules, were barely regulated. They provided another avenue for him to hide the stolen funds. Most importantly, J.Lo knew that transactions involving government funds faced far less scrutiny than those of private companies. This lack of transparency allowed him to move massive amounts of money without raising alarms. In total, J.Lo is estimated to have stolen around $4.5 billion from 1MDB. A fund that was supposed to improve Malaysia's economy became J.Lo's personal piggy bank. Najib, who was receiving secret payments from the fund for his political ambitions, knew something was off. However, J.Lo had promised him that the fund would strengthen Malaysia's relationships with the Middle East and bring in much-needed development. Najib never imagined J.Lo would take so much for himself. As time passed, people in Malaysia began asking questions. Where was the money? Why weren't the promised power plants and developments materializing? Suspicion grew, and soon international investigators started looking into 1MDB. Foreign media exposed a trail of extravagant spending, offshore accounts, and high-profile parties linked to J.Lo. The promises of economic growth and infrastructure faded into thin air. What was left was a web of lies, corruption, and theft. Before the full story could unravel, J.Lo's schemes were already falling apart. Yet, his ability to deceive so many for so long remains one of the most audacious financial frauds in history. J.Lo always seemed untouchable, mainly because he had the Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak, firmly on his side. This wasn't by accident. J.Lo made sure to funnel large amounts of stolen money into financing Najib's political campaigns. The funds were used to host massive events and make charitable donations, all aimed at boosting Najib's public image. While J.Lo's schemes kept 1MDB hemorrhaging money, the fund sank deeper into debt, eventually running billions of dollars into the red. In 2015, everything began to unravel. A whistleblower leaked emails to the press, revealing critical details about J.Lo's operations. These emails sparked investigations and shed light on the massive scale of the scam. The revelations outraged the Malaysian people. Hundreds of thousands of citizens took to the streets, demanding Najib's resignation for his involvement in the 1MDB scandal. But Najib refused to step down, believing the outrage would die down by the next election. For J.Lo, the media exposure was a clear sign that his time in the spotlight was over. As allegations mounted, he realized he had to go into hiding. Even with vast amounts of money stashed away, J.Lo struggled with isolation. He hated being alone, and this new life of seclusion was far from the glamorous existence he was used to. Around the same time, his relationship with Miranda Kerr ended, adding to his misery. Then, in May 2018, the unthinkable happened. Najib suffered a shocking election defeat, marking the first regime change in Malaysia's history. The people had had enough of corruption, and Najib's party, which had ruled for 60 years, was voted out. Right after the election, Najib and his wife attempted to flee the country, but protesters stopped them at the airport. Najib claimed he was leaving for a golf trip, but it was clear he knew what was coming. Shortly after, the police raided Najib's house. What they found shocked everyone. $274 million worth of luxury items, including jewelry, designer handbags, tiaras, watches, and $28 million in cash. The evidence of bribery was undeniable. Anti-corruption officials arrested Najib at his mansion. He was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to 12 years in prison, though he continues to appeal, insisting the money was legitimate political donations. Meanwhile, he remains a controversial figure, still involved in some parts of the government. As for J.Lo, he had vanished. Rumors suggested he fled to China, possibly residing in a villa owned by a high-ranking Chinese official. There were even reports of him being spotted at a Victoria's Secret party in Shanghai, still trying to cling to his old party lifestyle, though now in a much quieter manner. Tim Leisner, the former Goldman Sachs executive who had helped facilitate the 1MDB deals, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery and money laundering. Goldman Sachs tried to distance itself, claiming only a few rogue employees were involved. However, in his guilty plea, Leisner revealed that avoiding compliance was deeply ingrained in Goldman Sachs's culture. The real victims of this scandal were the Malaysian people. The 1MDB fund was supposed to finance development projects that would benefit everyone. Instead, it became a cash grab for the elite. Billions of dollars meant for the country's progress disappeared into a maze of offshore accounts and shell companies. Even today, investigators like the FBI are still trying to trace where all the money went. What made this scam possible was a system that rewarded silence and greed. Powerful individuals and big banks turned a blind eye, choosing profits over ethics. The financial system, as the 1MDB case revealed, can be easily manipulated by those who know how to exploit its weaknesses. Despite everything, J.Lo remains technically free. While he cannot visit many countries and has to keep a low profile, he has managed to avoid imprisonment. However, this life of hiding is far from what he wanted. Reports suggest that by the end of it all, J.Lo had gone from being a confident, carefree figure to someone consumed by paranoia and anxiety. Even during his peak, when he partied with movie stars and models on yachts and jets, J.Lo never seemed truly happy. Those who met him said he appeared desperate for approval and respect. This need to be liked and admired likely drove him to chase more money and power, rather than stopping while he was ahead. In the end, it was this relentless greed that led to his downfall. The story of J.Lo is a wild one, filled with deception, excess, and betrayal. It's a tale of how ambition without limits can spiral out of control, leaving destruction in its wake. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more fascinating tales. Cheers!